10 hours long, but it is a book that I would highly recommend. So before Dido joins us, there's a few things that I just thought talk about today on Teachers Talk Radio. And the first thing this week, really, that we've all been talking about with the teachers has been results week. And it's been quite a nerve-wracking week, even though people are saying, well, yes, everything is as we expected because they were teacher assessed grades, but it is still the unknown. And it's been a really difficult, challenging year for students, teachers, school leaders. It's not been nice. I personally found the whole teacher assessed grades process experience incredibly stressful, and not something I ever hope to go through again. But I'm keen to hear from other teachers. The teachers I know would probably say the same thing. A positive that has come out this week, which a few people have said, is that they've quite liked having the A-level results and the GCSE results within the same week. Because usually, and perhaps not this year with COVID and pandemic restrictions and so on, but usually results day are a day that you go into school. So some teachers and leaders actually plan their holidays around this. And that they go into school for the A-level results, they go into school the week after, and everyone just feels that putting the results in the same week seems to make more sense. So maybe moving forwards, this might be something that we do. So what are your experiences of results week? If you're secondary, that is, or perhaps if you're a parent, and you've had your children receiving their grades this week, what's your experience been? We will hear more about that from our award-winning newsreader, Megan Goods. But anyway, before we get to that, something else I wanted to talk about was some books that are coming out, back to school books for teachers. Now, lots of these books that I'll be talking about, I haven't read myself, but I want to read. So these are books that I plan to buy as soon as they come out, and I'm very excited about that. So perhaps there's some books that you're looking to read, either in the summer or when you go back to school. What are those books? I'm going to talk about some today that are not yet out, but they will be out next month. And actually, I've had the privilege of reading some of them, so I can give a little bit of a sneak preview. And indulge me as well, because one of my books is out next month. So my 5th book has been sent to print. It's very exciting. It's part of the In Action series, 5 formative assessment strategies based on the work of Dylan William and Siobhan Leahy. So if you're not familiar with the In Action series, I'll just briefly explain. So the very first guests on my Teacher Talk Radio show were Tom Sherrington and Oliver Caviglioli, and they are an amazing walkthrough dream team. They collaborate on quite a lot, including the In Action series. So the series actually began before it was intended to be a series, and this was by Tom Sherrington. So Tom Sherrington became familiar with the work of Barak Rosenshine. He started blogging and speaking about it, and then someone suggested that he write a short book. And he did, and it's been hugely successful. I've actually got 2 copies. I'm not sure why, but I think most schools have copies of Rosenshine's Principles in Action. Takes the research and the work of Barak Rosenshine, and Tom Sherrington puts his own spin on it with his own advice from years of experience in the classroom. So based on the popularity of Tom Sherrington's Rosenshine In Action book, Tom decided to create a series. And Oliver Caviglioli illustrated the original. So Oliver Caviglioli's illustrated this series. So then Tom Sherrington and the walkthrough team, they thought about some really key seminal pieces of research that they could ask teachers in schools to write about. So we've already had quite a few in the series. We had Ollie Lovell. He's based in Australia. He has his own podcast. He's a teacher, and he wrote about John Sweller's cognitive load theory in action. And he worked with John Sweller when writing that. So that's been very helpful. Then we also had the In Action book by Mark and Zoe Enser, where they were looking at Farella and Mayer's generative learning. I've got that here. I really, really like that book. It's very, very good. I like the layout. These are short, concise books, lots of tips and practical examples. Really, really good. John Tomset has written one recently. Nimish Ladd has just published about the Marge model. So there's lots more books to come, but the next one is my book. So I am very excited, nervous as well, but mainly excited. So my book is based on 5 strands of formative assessment that Dylan William and Siobhan Leahy have wrote about originally. So the 5 strands, it's really brilliant. It encompasses a lot. And when Tom Sherrington contacted me and asked me to write this book, of course, my first reaction was, well, yeah, I would love to, because I'm very familiar with the work of formative assessment and especially Dylan William as well. So it was just an opportunity not to be missed. So then I reached out to Dylan William and told him that I would be writing this book, and said, of course, if he's too busy to help me, that's not a problem. I'm just letting him know. If he does want to help me, then obviously I would appreciate that. And he said, yeah, I'd be more than happy to help, Kate. So he has been absolutely fantastic. I've been emailing him chapters that he's kept giving me feedback. He's cleared some things up, which I felt perhaps I needed a bit of clarity myself. He's just basically made the book just even better. So I kept sending him chapters, and then once I'd finished the whole book, I sent him the manuscript. So then he took some time to look through it, give me his feedback, and that was so helpful. What an absolute privilege. And Tom Sherrington also edited it as well. And Tom was brilliant, because what I struggled with was the short word count. So the book is 25,000 words, and Love to Teach, my first book, was about 72,000. But that is the focus of the In Action series, is that they're not, a very in-depth and detailed exploration, although there is detail and discussion, but they are a short, clear, concise, practical guide written by teachers for teachers. So Tom really helped me in terms of how to structure it, what things I should include, shouldn't include. And then finally, I needed someone to write the foreword. And a few people have said to me, why didn't Dylan William write the foreword to your book? And we did think about that at the beginning. But as this is based on the work of Dylan William, and Dylan William has been helping me with the editing process, it almost didn't feel right to him to write a foreword, which could essentially be praising his own work. So I said to Dylan, my first choice, if I could pick anyone to write a foreword for this book, it would be John Hattie. But I was aware that they disagreed on some elements. But Dylan Williams said, no, absolutely, that would be brilliant if John Hattie would agree. I think he'd be a great choice. So I reached out to previous Teacher Talk Radio guest, John Hattie, my friend in Melbourne, asked him, and of course he agreed, because he's so lovely and kind and very supportive. And his foreword is amazing. It gives a bit of a history about formative assessment, the different strands, which are about learning intention, success criteria. There's feedback, there's activating students as learning resources for one another, activating students as owners of their own learning, engineering effective discussions and activities that elicit evidence of learning. So the way that Hattie summarizes that, the foreword is absolutely superb, and I cannot wait for people to read it. So that's my book. That's out next month. So give that a little bit of a plug, and I'm sure I'll talk more about it. But some other books that are also out. We have Teach Like a Champion, 3.0. So version 3, 63 techniques that put the students on the path to college. So Teach Like a Champion is incredibly popular by Doug Lamov, and he's updated this. And I know, because I've been chatting to him, he looked at my recent book and the section about cold calling and gave me some feedback. And I know he's got a section on retrieval practice in Teach Like a Champion 3.0. So in a few weeks, Doug Lamov will be a guest on this show. So that is very exciting indeed. More books to come out. We have Organize Ideas, Thinking by Hand, Extending by the Mind, and that is by Oliver Caviglioli and David Goodwin. So I'm really excited about this book. I think I will learn a lot. I see a lot online about word diagrams, graphic organizers, and it's not something that I'm particularly confident with. But Oliver and David, from what I've seen, they are able to explain things really clearly, and it's very helpful. And actually, I'm in that book as well. So I'm a case study, but there's so many other contributions from teachers all around the world about amazing things that they've been doing. So I think that will be a great book. Now, 2 other books coming out by the same person, and that is Bruce Robertson. Now, Bruce Robertson authored The Teaching Delusion, and he's got The Teaching Delusion 2, Teaching Strikes Back, and The Teaching Delusion 3, Power Up Your Pedagogy. Now, I'm really looking forward to reading The Teaching Delusion 2. By the way, you don't necessarily have to have read one book to understand the other, although that always helps. And I say that because I read Teacher Delusion 3, the Teaching Delusion, sorry, Power Up Your Pedagogy. I wrote the foreword to that. Absolute privilege. A really good book, a great blend of evidence, experience, but also Bruce Robertson is just fantastic. He doesn't pull any punches. He just goes for it. I can see David Didow is in the studio now. David Didow, you can call in whenever you want. I'm just talking about some books at the moment, books I'm very excited to read. When it came to David Didow's books, I had to ask Twitter how many he'd written because I wasn't quite sure. I thought it was 7. And I was correct. Oh, sorry, someone has asked in the comments for me to speak slowly. I do realise that we have listeners from all around the world. So Mary, where are you listening from? And I will try to speak more slowly. You are welcome. Okay, then, some more books that I'm looking forward to. Habits of Success, Getting Every Student Learning by Harry Fletcher Wood. Again, a big fan of Harry Fletcher Wood. I think that will be another superb book. I haven't read it. I look forward to it. Teach to the Top, Aiming High for Every Learner by Megan Mansworth. Another book I haven't read, but the reviews, the endorsements that are coming in are very, very popular and praising it. Here we go. Let's see. Hello, David. Are you there?
Okay, how are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, well, thank you.
Good, good. Thank you for joining us today. So, with all my guests, I start off with a fun fact. So, I've got a fun fact about you, David, which I
You
can't
have?
say. I have, yes. And this is a fun fact that I couldn't say about anyone else who's been a guest. This is unique to you. Don't worry,
Right.
it's a good one. It's not nothing. It's the fact that you have been to my school here in Abu Dhabi, and there's not many people I can say that to. So you've been to the British school
Right.
Al Khabaira. Yeah. Do you remember that when we met in Dubai at Research Ed Dubai?
Yeah.
You were the keynote speaker, and I had literally just got a job at what the school's called BSAC, and they were just so proud of the fact David Didow has been to their school, because we don't get many visitors in the UAE. So you enjoyed that, your time in the UAE, your visit? You've been a few times then?
Yeah, I've been a couple of times to the UAE, and it's very warm. Or you get that strange thing, don't you? That it's obviously it's blindingly hot, and then you go into any building and it's Arctic. So
Yeah.
there's a real discombobulating sensation of going from very hot to very cold. You need layers, don't you?
Oh, it's so strange. I always have colds because of the air conditioning, and I never really know what to wear here. But Research Ed Dubai is the only Research Ed event I've ever been to, because I've been out
Oh,
here, and we were meant to have another one, but then obviously it got cancelled. So, but anyway, it was
right.
fantastic to meet you there as the keynote speaker. As I said, I've been researching you. I've been listening to you for 10 hours this week.
Oh, good
with
God.
your and now I'm listening to you for even longer. But yeah,
I apologise unreservedly.
how was that experience? What I'm referring to is your audible making kids cleverer.
Recording it.
Uh, yeah, how was that?
It was hard work, Kate. It was done over 2 days. So as you said, it's sort of over 10 hours of recording, and we did and we did it in my office. This guy Kevin came and set up a recording studio in my office, and so we spent the first day doing quite a bit of setup. So we probably got about 4 hours recording done in the first day. So the second day, speaking for 6 hours, reading for
Yeah,
6 hours, and reading with real sort of care and attention. And every now and again, Kevin would say, "No, can you read that bit back again?" And by the end of it, my jaw felt like it was dislocating. I felt, yeah, it had gone. Oh, my face had gone very, after a parents' evening, you sort of get lockjaws
yeah.
from smiling so much. It was like the opposite of that, if anything. Very, very strange,
It is
exhausting stuff.
better though. I do prefer it when the author reads the book, because I asked Alex Quigley. I was like, "Why didn't
Depends
you
on the
read your book?"
author.
Well, yeah,
Depends
you're
on the
absolutely
author,
right.
Kate. I remember
Yeah,
reading to what's his face, Jordan Peterson. He's got such a horrible voice. No offense to any Jordan Peterson fans out there, but I'd have paid to have someone record that for me, just not have to listen to it.
Oh, actually, it was great to hear your voice then, I should say, because obviously I've heard you speak. So when you're reading books, you hear, and you've heard the person's voice, you hear their voice in your head. So it was really good to
Yeah.
literally hear you in my head. So that was
Okay,
good.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah, let's start off actually then. As I said, did my research. You've published 7 books, but obviously contributed and written forwards and stuff to more. But you're back in the classroom, is that right? So if you started off, well, you didn't start off
Well,
as a
not
oh
really.
okay, you did go all right. I tell you what, I'll leave it up to you. Tell us a little bit of an overview of your career, because in your audible book I really like that about how you didn't start off like I went straight from uni to the classroom. You didn't,
Okay.
did you?
Yeah, no, no,
Yeah,
no, no, I
you're a
didn't.
bit different. So tell us about that
Oh,
then.
okay, I had wilderness years. Where I left school and home at 16, which seems impossibly young. I've got 2 daughters who are 16 and 18, and the idea of either of them leaving home at the moment seems like a remote and distant dream. But I, believing myself to be completely self-sufficient and as mature as I was ever going to be, got into a row with my dad, who said, I'd left, as I say, I left school at 16, and I'd gone onto a YTS scheme. You probably don't remember those youth training schemes, they were called in the 80s, and where you were paid a pittance and worked full time. It was a very good scheme, and I can't remember exactly what happened, but I think I was working in a shoe shop. I think I got sacked. I can't remember the details of it, and anyway, uh, uh, and as an adjunct, it wasn't sort of directly related or a caused by the sacking, but at the same sort of time, I was going out and drinking heavily, as a sort of irresponsible youngster, and I'd had a particularly busy night where I'd nicked a bottle of my dad's whiskey and taken it out, and and basically drank far too much. And according to witnesses, I did a grand jeté from a bench and landed on my face, and an ambulance was called and I was taken to hospital, where they catheterized me and sort of gave me a stomach pump and kept me in for a
Oh
couple of days. And I
God.
had no memory of this. I couldn't remember anything. It was, that people talk about sort of blacking out, and this was really quite a frightening experience because I woke up in the hospital with no idea how I got there, and I had my bus pass with me, which had my parents' address in, so obviously they'd been called, and it was, I think, deeply humiliating for them. And when I got back, I had these terrible sort of cuts and grazes on my face where I'd landed on the pavement. And I got home a day or so later, having also been sacked from my YTS job at the shoe shop. And my dad said, "If
Oh.
you don't come back with a job tonight, don't come back." And I thought, right, I won't. And in a fit of pique, and I think I'd been engineering this situation. I'd been wanting it, and I went to the council at the time and said, "I'm declared myself homeless," and they put me in Birmingham City Mission, where there was a big dormitory, and I had to share a room with like 14 old blokes who used to wet the bed every night, and that was an experience. And very, very rapidly from that, I went to live in a squat. I lived in a squat for, I don't know, 6 months or so before eventually ending up in my own council flat. Believe it or not, at the age of 17, I had my own council flat. So impossible to imagine any of these things now. This couldn't happen today, but it did then.
I didn't know that.
Anyway,
I
lots of
knew that.
yeah. No, I'm
Yeah, I
afraid
know.
so.
I knew that you went to teaching a little bit later on, and that you had this other job
Yeah,
that
no, I
had
was.
absolutely nothing to do with teaching, and you just
Oh,
sort of
all sorts of. I've had more terrible jobs than you can imagine. I did a lot of work. For a while, I worked on building sites. So there's lots of,
yeah.
it used to be the case that I could walk around Birmingham and go, "Oh, built that, built that." But obviously, they've knocked most of those things down now. It's almost unrecognisable. So I did that sort of thing. I was a chugger for a short and humiliating period. Those charity muggers who sort of go up and go, "Do you want to make a donation to?" Did that. Horrible, horrible, deeply horrible. I did all sorts of things, very few of which I'm proud of. And and I can't remember exactly how old I was. I think I was about, well, during one of the periods of working on a building site, I was also going to nights. I decided I wanted to go to night school and do some A levels. And I said to my foreman on the site, I said, "I've got these A level exams coming up. Do you mind if I have the day off to go and to go and sit my exams?" And he said, "Oh, all right, okay." And anyway, I went off, and I can't remember which exam it was, but I came back after sitting this exam to the site, and everyone was calling me professor. I hadn't actually obviously passed it. I'd just taken an A level, and obviously that was enough to be. And I got
Yeah.
promoted off the back of that as well, because they thought clearly this chap who's taking A levels is too bright to be a labourer. So I was promoted to engineer's mate, which meant I got to hold his theodolite, which was nice.
Well, this is really interesting. Sorry that I'm just giggling away, but because of your emphasis on becoming cleverer and the importance of knowledge, and then this sort of journey that you've had into teaching as well. So I know, it's clear you're an English teacher, you're a superb writer. So you said you're sort of in the classroom now, or you're not, or you did go back to the classroom in the pandemic.
Yeah,
Is that
no.
right?
It's September gone. Last September last year, most of my work as a education consultant had dried up, and I was getting some, various bits online, and I thought, I'm spending a lot of time at home, sort of doing stuff. I was doing a sort of YouTube show with Martin Robinson and having a bit of fun, but I thought, I don't feel like I'm being very purposeful, and there's all of this pandemic experience going on, and I'd really like, it feels like a good time to see if any foolish school would be up for allowing me in for a day or two, and I put a call out on Twitter saying, "Does anyone fancy giving me a part-time job a part-time temporary job, and lots of very kind people got in touch and said that they would be prepared to risk that. And I ended up working for a day in 2 different schools in Gloucester and a couple of days at the school in Bristol, and I did that up until Christmas, when I got a job, the job that I have now, which is working for Ormiston's Academy Trust as their well, I've got a very long title. It's Senior Lead Practitioner for English, which
Oh,
is very, it's a lot of fun, and I'm really enjoying it. And
I I thought you were the king of English. I thought that was your official title.
well, so my boss, who's got the best name, my boss is called Tuesday Humby, which is just a brilliant name, and she dubbed me the king of English, and I thought that's quite funny, so I put it on my Twitter thing. What do you call it?
Yeah,
The thing where you,
your
yeah.
bio.
So yeah. So that's it. That's and obviously I'm not royalty. In case any of the listeners are wondering, I don't. It's an ironic statement. I don't really think that I'm the king.
Yeah, you're not
I'm
a
not.
diva. You're not demanding that I refer to you that way, are you? So
No, you don't have to refer to. You don't have to say Your Majesty or anything like that. It's all very informal, Kate.
Oh, I'm glad we've cleared that up because I wasn't sure.
Yeah, good.
But
Yeah.
during the lockdown, you also wrote a few books as well, then, didn't you? You just sort of thought, well, I mean, you've been
Yeah.
writing books your whole career, 7, as we said.
No,
I've read 5.
wow, you say that. So obviously, I came very late to this sort of thing in terms of my whole.
Oh,
So the first book I wrote was in 2011, and I'd been teaching for 15 years by that point.
oh, wow.
So I know, yeah. See, all of these Johnny come latelys, who get
Yeah,
straight into. I know, yeah. No, I was a hard bitten, fairly experienced teacher by the time. Somebody asked me, and I don't know if you've ever come across Jackie Beer, who wrote the perfect
yeah,
Ofsted lesson, but I had the
yeah.
temerity. I read it, and this was back in the days when that's what she wrote in her book was exactly what you needed to do if you wanted to get an outstanding lesson observation from an Ofsted inspector. Anyway, I read her book, and I had the temerity to say to her, I've got some ideas on how to improve your book. And instead of getting the hump, she thanked me and used a couple of them in her second edition. And then she got in touch a bit later to say, would I be interested in writing an English version? And obviously I was hugely flattered. So I said, thank you very much. And so that was and I'm slightly ashamed of that book now because obviously it's very dated. Hopefully nobody reads it anymore, but occasionally I still get, English teachers of a certain age coming up and going, I read your book when I was training and it really helped. And I apologize. And I said, I'm very sorry about that. I'm sorry it happened that way. But they go, no, it was really
No,
good. But anyway, it is what it is.
it's
It's
a
an
book of its
artifact
time,
of
isn't
a
it?
time and place. It really is. It really is.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I
Well,
wouldn't
I
recommend it
meant,
to anyone now.
but well, then you obviously have done your What If book, so you obviously had, like quite a lot of people, a turning point in your career where things that you were previously doing, and then you've gone, oh,
Yeah.
what if? What if
Well,
everything I thought
so
was
when
wrong?
so you know yeah. So when I first joined Twitter in 2010, gosh, all those years ago, Kate, and it was a different. People say this, but it was a different place, and it wasn't so sort of riven and factionalized, and we were all just teachers in it together, and being jolly and when I were a lad, it was a better place. But spending time in that forum, I encountered people having opinions that I'd never ever heard expressed before, and some of your listeners will be familiar with the infamous old Andrew, who
Yeah.
used to take me to task on things. I'd say things. The early blog posts on my blog, they're still up there for anyone who's bored or interested enough to have a look. But there are these long arguments between me and old Andrew in the comment section of some of my blog posts, where he, tries to dismantle my idiotic thinking. And I think now I used to get, like everybody else, I used to get very upset with him, and because he's relentless. But I think back now and think, that he had the time and the patience and the dedication to to try and reason with me, and over time, it started to make an impression. And I remember there's an English teacher who started on Twitter around about the same time as me, James Theobald, who
Yeah.
James Theo. Some of your listeners might know. We went on our road to Damascus experience at roughly the same time, and we used to sort of get in touch with each other and say, "But what would Andrew say?" and sort of check out our thinking. And now, of course, generally speaking, I mean, obviously, Andrew doesn't talk about any of this stuff now. He just talks about internet trolls. But it's it was an education, and I really
Yeah.
so I really believed all of those things which people now say nobody ever believed those things. They did, and I was one of them. And I just assumed that if everybody in authority in the schools that I worked at, and the inspectorate and everywhere else, if everybody in authority said this is the way that things must be, that surely they must be right. Why would they say it if they weren't right? So I just and I found it really awkward, and I used to feel guilty about it. I used to do what I now sort of think of as sneaky teaching, where whenever the door was open, you'd have to be doing these lessons where you didn't tell the kids anything, and you just sort of just went, oh well, I've hidden the answer to that under a pile of books somewhere in the classroom. You'll have to find it out for yourself. But every now and again, when I got sort of worried about them not knowing anything, I'd have to shut the door and quickly teach them something while no one was looking. And I did feel guilty about that. But I remember, gosh, go on. Sorry, Kate.
No, I was just going to say, I can relate to that as well. And I remember very clearly a blog post that you wrote about potatoes being hidden in the classroom. Because obviously they were in a lesson, there was Irish history, potato famine, and students had to come in, find the potatoes. And then when you were looking later, the answers, they weren't that good because they spent so much time searching for potatoes. And actually, whilst I didn't do that, I did things like that. And it's the way when you were writing about it that just made me think, oh my goodness, what were we thinking? These things, they did happen. They did.
They did happen. Dear. They did happen. They happened because we were told to do them. And that people would come and observe your lessons and say, well, it would be better if you hid some potatoes. And you'd go, oh, okay then. But I remember, this is, way what something like, 2006, something like that. Back when we had key stage 3 SATs. I don't know if you remember that. And so students had to do SATs exams in English and maths, and I think science as well. And part of that was they had to answer questions on the Shakespeare play. And so, the typically at that time, I would just give the kids in my classes like the easiest possible text to read, so that I wasn't storing up problems and challenges for myself. But we had to do a Shakespeare play because they'd be assessed on it. And I remember that one particular year, they were the play in question that was set was Romeo and Juliet, and I'd to try and engage my students, I'd got them making sock puppets of the characters from the play, and then I got them to do little sort of modern vignettes of various of the scenes, and most of the students in my class chose to do little sort of Jeremy Kyle type things, because that was what was popular then. And obviously he's been taken off air now, hasn't he, Jeremy, for being a wrong. But anyway, then he was all the rage with the young people, and they did these really truly awful little, as I say, little vignettes where basically their sock puppets would just sort of shout at each other and punch each other and stuff. But eventually, we did all of that for lessons, and after weeks and weeks and weeks of this sort of stuff, and eventually it sort of became clear that I would have to do a bit of reading and writing with the students. And I distinctly remember sitting down next to one of my students, and he was I'd asked the class a question about the character of Mercutio, who's Romeo's mate in the play. And this boy was going, I don't know anything about Mercutio, I can't do it. And I said, now you say that, but I remember that you made your sock puppet. You made a sock puppet Mercutio, and then you acted him out in your terrible Jeremy Kyle thing. Do you remember that? And he said, sort of. And so we talked about that for a bit, and then I said, come on, so what can you remember about Mercutio? And he thought for a bit, and he said, I think he was blue.
Oh, I shouldn't laugh. I shouldn't laugh because this is sad, isn't it? And this is, but your book couldn't be further from that, making kids cleverer. You're basically just tearing all that stuff apart. And it's a really brilliant book. And well, not tearing it, those specific activities. Oh, it's so good, so thorough. You know what? This might sound strange, but it was, I think it was in the introduction where I was thinking, I want to be cleverer. That's what I just kept thinking, like, because your arguments for, well, who wouldn't? And but your arguments for making kids cleverer, I just kept thinking, well, I want to just be more clever. Yeah, I want to learn more. I want more knowledge. And then I struggle to understand that this counter argument against knowledge still exists. It's mainly the Google, obviously you, Daisy Christodoulou, Dylan, lots of great people have been, and there is an enthusiasm for knowledge-rich curriculum. But there's still a little bit of a backlash about that. So what?
Yeah, and I think it's less and less. It's people within education. It's more sort of, or certainly within England, it's less and less that are most. Well, I mean, I live in a bubble basically where I only really get invited to schools that already sort of agree with the things that I think I'm going to say. So most of the schools I visit, I'm going, oh, that's brilliant. And of course, there are schools that don't take that view and sort of have a different perspective. But you can compare with what it was like 10 years ago. It's a completely different landscape here in England.
Yeah.
But internationally, I think that's less the case. And so I think that the wider public have imbibed these myths about how people learn and what makes us successful, and they trot out this sort of received wisdom that they don't have any evidence for. It's just it gets repeated so much that it must be true, rather like how I used to believe that discovery type learning must be right because it's what everyone told me to do. And I think there's the as I start by saying in the book, Making Kids Cleverer, the myths that exist around intelligence are really, really pervasive. That we've done a really good job as a society of sort of stitching up the idea of intelligence and sort of saying things like, most people know because they've heard it that the only thing IQ tests predict is how good you are at doing IQ tests and things like that, for which the actual evidence on the ground is completely contrary. That whatever IQ is, and that's a moot and interesting discussion. But whatever it is, it's so correlated with many other things that we think are valuable that it must be important. Whatever's being measured is significant. But it's really difficult to tell people that because they've got this really fixed idea about how the world works, and you start telling them they're wrong, and they go, no, I'm not, and then you start presenting them with evidence, and they say, well, you can prove anything with facts, can't you? And what can you do with that? And I think it's very much the same as the argument that's doing the rounds currently, with lots and lots of very well-intentioned people going, oh, we've had 2 years of nonsense with the COVID cancelling normal GCSE and A-level exams in England. So clearly, it's all gone very badly. So clearly, what we need to do is get rid of exams, and because they're unfair, aren't they? And when you confront people with the evidence that yes, exams are really unfair, and yes, exams have all sorts of flaws, but actually, every other alternative that anyone's so far come up with have more flaws and are more unfair. And here are the sort of research studies which bear that out. Here's the evidence for that position. people get really angry and go, no, that's not true. Okay, well, where's your contrary body of evidence? Well, I haven't got any. I've just got the feels, haven't I? It feels right to say that exams are unfair and we should do more teacher assessment. And whatever evidence there is that flies in the face of my gut instinct must be wrong because it feels wrong. And
Well,
I'm so used to that now that it doesn't really bother me now.
Well, it felt wrong for me workload wise. Teacher assessed grades
Oh,
were
God.
just horrific. So, yeah, but it is interesting.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, though, there is a very exciting time in England because I know international schools are very different. The fact that the British School Al Kabira invited you as a keynote speaker, I wasn't at the school at the time. But that told me
Right.
a lot about the school. It told me that, oh,
I
okay,
think they probably made a mistake, didn't they?
No, they were very keen to have you. And I thought, this is an evidence-informed, research-driven school. This is a school. I'm not saying you're the reason I went there, but probably you contributed. But why I wanted to. Yeah, but the school I was at was promoting learning styles, and
yeah,
it was really weird because I was on Twitter and I was reading and writing about all this stuff that what I was doing in my classroom, I was embracing retrieval practice, but around me, others weren't. So it is very different in international. And I think now schools around the world are looking to the UK, and this knowledge-rich movement has been a really good thing. But I'm just going to ask you actually, because somebody's written about you and a few others, and I don't want to say this wrong. DIKR. You're familiar with this? The
no.
direct instruction, right? So DIKR is a sort of an acronym, direct instruction, knowledge rich. It's Guy Claxton. I haven't read the book, so I can't talk too much about it. But Guy Claxton was a guest on Tom Rogers' show. I asked Paul Kirshner about this because Guy Claxton, in his book, The Future of Teaching and the Myths That Hold It Back, he writes about you and other people, Tom Bennett, Paul Kirshner, Carl Hendrick, as all sort of, it almost seems a little bit like an attack. I've got the quote for me. It says, it's a notable tight-knit bubble, mutual appreciation, just about how you support each other, and just, yeah. What have you read the Guy Claxton book? Do you have any, what's your response to this?
So, well, I don't know really. I mean, it's he's a funny fruit guy, isn't he? I was asked by Schools Week to write a review of the book, and I said I wasn't prepared to do it because I tried to take the view that if I haven't got anything positive to say, I'd really rather not say anything at all. I think I'd rather that there really isn't anything positive that I can think to say of Guy Claxton, so I'd rather not say anything.
No, that is absolutely fine. We've had Guy on the show, and I asked Paul Kirshner, and I just thought he's naming people in his book, and he's talking about these people like personally. I mean, that I wasn't named, but I'd be really upset if I was named in a book like that in that way. But yeah, that's absolutely fine. There we go.
I suppose it shows, Kate, the positive thing is that you're having an impact if people feel the need to do that. But honestly, it comes with the territory, I guess, that people feel that that they'd like to make personal attacks and that obviously that's their right to do that. But I reserve the right not to reciprocate.
That is a very classy answer, David. So, going back to direct instruction, knowledge rich, like Clarkson says, your book has got lots of arguments why kids should be clever, how to make kids cleverer. And one of the things that sort of struck me, and this comes back to what you said, that schools and teachers were always well intentioned, but you said schools don't always do a good job at making kids cleverer. So why is that? Where are we going wrong in trying to make kids cleverer? How can we address that?
Well, I mean, I certainly don't think that's fate, or I certainly, but I think it is business as usual and status quo. That if you do what's kind of, what most people are doing, then what you're probably doing is something that is likely, inadvertently, I don't think this is deliberate, but it's likely to be most advantageous to the children who are already most advantaged. And I do think that a lot of the more advantaged students in the school are successful, despite the fact that, despite what we do in schools, that what we do doesn't really make that much difference to them, thank goodness. And if they are successful, then it's because of things that beyond the school gates. But for students who have less of a sort of are less able to hook into those the kind of things which make you academically successful outside of school. Children from less advantaged backgrounds are just far less likely to get what they need from any other place. And so, if schools aren't providing it, probably nobody is. And so, to me, this is very much a social justice argument, that if you're interested in children who have least being prioritized and having the best shot at things, then it makes sense to try and think, that if my arguments are correct, and obviously, I'm very happy for people to take on the arguments themselves, but if my argument's correct, that there are significant advantages to being cleverer, and the most likely way to make people cleverer is by getting them to know more. If that's broadly speaking correct, then it seems to me to be morally wrong to turn your face to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does seem like one of those things that surely we can all agree on that, but then it gets a bit complex. Is what is it students should know? What are the and that's
Absolutely. So, I definitely take the view that it's worth knowing everything that it's possible to know, that all knowledge is precious, whether or not it serves the slightest human use. But time is finite, I think as, that art is long and time is short, as Ben Franklin is attributed to have said. And so we don't have time to teach children everything. So we have to make choices, and the choices that we make have to be guided by something, and it's better if they're guided by something beyond what I reckon is the best thing or what you reckon is best. I think it makes sense. It's reasonable to have some principles by which you make selections, and so I found it very helpful to explore the idea that the ideas of powerful knowledge and cultural richness to help inform those decisions about the choices that we make.
Well, you actually tweeted something a while ago that just really made me think. I mean, I'm in a weird position at the moment. I'm leaving the school in December, so I'm still here.
Okay.
I do, yeah. So I said I was leaving, but then my replacement, he can't join until January. So I was like, okay, I'll do one more term. So we've been reviewing the curriculum, and it's a strange one because I won't be here to see it through. So I'm working with the incoming head of history. And you tweeted about how, and this is exactly what we have done, is about topics fitting a term or a half term, and how that sort of does have a restriction on the curriculum.
Well,
and
yeah. I don't have a problem with it particularly.
No.
I think, it is. And I think that if we're making decisions because obviously we have to make decisions because they're logistically sensible. The reason we teach lessons in school is because that's, no one's come up with a sort of more convenient way to get children to sort of, in secondary schools, to get children around the school and to visit all of the different teachers that they need to visit to get their curriculum entitlement. But there's the downside to teaching lessons is that we try and shoehorn units of teaching or units of learning into these sort of 50-minute or hour-long sessions, and that's really artificial. It doesn't really make sense. And the same sort of thing happens in terms of terms, that we have these, 6 or 3 or whatever, how many terms it is across the course of a year. So let's fit all of our units of learning neatly into these terms. And again, it doesn't really, that it can kind of feel emotionally satisfying to do that, but it isn't necessarily the best way to think about how the content plays out over time. And so, and it's interesting that when I was first head of English all those years ago, and that had, as far as I'm aware, that had never occurred to me or anyone else that I ever worked with, and we just did what we'd always done. And the first time I encountered, I can't remember who it was now, but the first time I encountered somebody saying, "Why does it have to fit into a term?" It sort of blew my mind a bit. I thought, yeah, why does it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. Because we'd always have those things, and you probably have this as well, Kate, where you'd get to the end of the term and you'd go, well, we've gone a bit slowly with this class, so we'll just stop. And then we'll start something new, or we'll miss out like a ton of stuff in order to get to the end, or all of these sorts of things. Or actually, it's gone too quickly, and now we'll have to do a bit of filler stuff that's got no particular value. And it's end of term. Let's watch some films because we finished. All of that kind of stuff. And that just felt like that was the way it had to be. And finding out that it doesn't have to be that way is quite refreshing, really, isn't it?
Well, actually, I think that I experienced that mind blown a few weeks ago just by your tweet, because we'd had this curriculum overview that fit in topics, and we're going, what topics should we do in this half term? And then I was just thinking, well, no, it doesn't have to be like that. And history and the same, with English, with a piece of text. I mean, stopping abruptly, imagine teaching the year 1066 and it's the end of the term and you just think, oh wait, I'm not going to tell you who won the Battle of Hastings. It just seems so ridiculous to do that, but it is something that you still do, is you try and squeeze it in, and let's speed it up and all these things about really, really interesting. But your book, like I said, it was 10 hours on the Audible. How long did it take you to write? It's so thorough, it's so well researched, just so well read. It's a really impressive book.
It took me a long time to write it, but mainly because I had a massive break in the middle where I couldn't write it because I don't know if you remember, a few years ago I wrote some blog posts about the role of genes in intelligence, which really upset a lot of people, and I was sort of the centre of a Twitter storm, and it drove me off social media for the best part of a year, really. And it was so sort of, it felt like such a sort of toxic place to be that I didn't want to be there. And at the same time, I didn't really think that I could finish the book. I didn't know how to continue with it. And so it took quite a bit of time to get over myself, really, and to think, actually, no, I do want to finish it. I do feel that there's important and useful content here. And actually, having gone through that experience did make me much more reflective, and did make me think about just made me sort of more careful with the evidence that I wanted to use. And so I think, the thing with those sorts of things, where people, like the idea of call out culture, where people sort of pick you up on things that you've done wrong, I think, in principle, there's nothing wrong with that. It's quite useful for people to say, hang on a second. It's just a shame it has to be so vitriolic and spiteful. And obviously there's, we've seen lots of that, it goes on the whole time, doesn't it? But there's, the stuff going on at the moment where, a particular book is being dragged through the forum of public disapproval, and I haven't got a comment particularly about the book or the author. It's just that there's a human being on the end of it, and that it's very easy. It's very, very easy for us to feel so indignant and so justified and righteous that we trample people, and I just prefer that we didn't do that. But anyway, there we are.
No, you're absolutely right about the human aspect of that. Isn't there that book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, or something?
Yeah,
Or
there is. I
and
read that in my, and obviously my experience is nothing comparative to many other people's. It just really shocked me at the time, because I felt like Twitter was my tribe. And yeah, the examples that John Ronson talks about, and So You've Been Publicly Shamed, are really mind blowing. And there's a few stories in there where people just really didn't do anything, and yet got on the wrong side of a mob. And yeah, I think it's definitely made me reflect that in the past I would be quite happy to put the boot in on things, and sort of, if I felt there was somebody a baddie and I was a goodie, that I'd want to sort of join in on that, sort of experience. And it's made me now much more mindful that that's not something I want to do.
yeah, well, I'm really
Yeah.
glad that you came back to social media and that you finished that book, because it is such a good book. And you also wrote, well, actually, sorry, I should mention this, because another book that I love is the book that you co-authored with Nick Rose about what
Oh
every
yeah.
teacher should know about psychology. And that's like a few years back now, but it's still a book that I think early careers teachers should read, and this interest in cognitive science, so helpful, such a great book. And you must have enjoyed writing that with Nick Rose, because I know you thank him, and you've obviously got a good relationship with him. And you're proud. Yeah, I mean, you must be proud of all your books. But that's a book that I, with my cognitive science background, has been very influential and helpful for me. But I'm just very aware of the time and all the books. Intelligent Accountability is so many books, David. I can't get through them. I've read 5 of your books, or maybe 6, 5. I don't. Yeah, 5. I haven't read Make Meaning in English, obviously, because that's subject specific, and I didn't read the one that you told us not to read, the Ofsted
Hey, look,
book.
I'm not saying that nobody should read it. If you want to read it, you go ahead. I'm just not recommending it.
Okay, Noreen has said, I'm really glad David came back to social media. Lots and lots of positive comments on Twitter as well about this conversation, and your honesty and openness as well. So, intelligent accountability, this is different again. So you got your cognitive science book with Nick Rose, which is obviously building on what if everything you knew about education was wrong, and in making kids cleverer, there's the importance of working memory, long-term memory. But then this is a very different book, Intelligent Accountability, Creating the Conditions for Teachers to Thrive. So I've got 2 questions, like, for people who haven't read this book, what is intelligent accountability? And then my second question will be, why did you feel the need to write this book? Why did you want to write this book?
Why did I want to write this book? Well, I felt, and I still feel, that it's, I think that in many ways it's very depressing. And so there's countless thousands of books about leadership that are out there. And there's hundreds and hundreds of books about school leadership, and some of them are fantastic, and some of them less so. And I felt like I had something to say that I didn't think anyone else was saying, and I felt that I had an argument that could sustain itself over the course of a book. And so the idea of intelligence accountability is that basically the accountability is a good thing, but it's very often done badly, and that if we want to get the best out of it, what I'm interested in is getting the best out of teachers, but if we want to get the best out of anybody that's being held to account, then we need to think really, really carefully about how the accountability process works. And so the moniker intelligent accountability was just it's just a nice way of saying good accountability, really. And I thought, I came up with the phrase intelligent accountability a few years ago, and I was very pleased with myself. But I've subsequently found out that I was not first to the party there. That intelligent accountability is a phrase that's been used quite a lot over the years, and I ended up put in a little appendix in the back of it. So disclosure, talking about all of the. Hello.
Hi, I can still hear you. Hello?
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. No, so I put in an appendix that was just talking about all of the usages of the origins of intelligence accountability that people like what's
I've
his
got it
name?
in front of me.
Yeah, Michael Fullen had used it, but the person that I was most struck with, and I only read these sort of researching the book, but the person that I was most struck with, who talks about intelligence accountability, is the philosopher Anara O'Neill, and you can still get her 2002 Reith lecture series on the BBC website, and it's fantastic. And she talks about, it's called A Question of Trust, and if anyone has got a spare couple of hours and wants to listen to her lectures, I totally recommend it. She's brilliant. And she talks, in a really measured, really interesting way about how accountability in public service could be improved. And that was, I found, I just stumbled across that when writing the book, which I was very grateful for.
And Ed Miliband. No, sorry, David Miliband.
David, the clever one.
In his speech, but he doesn't actually. You wrote here, he didn't spell out what intelligent accountability framework might look like. So, which is what your book explores, lots of things that, myths about leadership, lethal mutations, and all these things that we sort of have these ideas. And I made mistakes. I've had 3 middle leadership roles, and when I came to this school, I had all these visions and ideas and enthusiasm, and I just needed to just stop and wait and observe. And you've got Sam Strickland who endorsed this book, and he's just fantastic, actually, writing about leadership as well. So, and I could see why he loved your book, because from what I've read from Sam and from this book, they are definitely in alignment with each other. So this would be another book that I'd recommend. Did you write this in lockdown as well? In your lockdown writing?
This was in fact, I wrote Making Meaning in English first, and I finished that in about June of the first lockdown, and sent that off to the publishers. But the publisher, the people Routledge, who published that, moved much more slowly than John Catt, who published Intelligent Accountability, which I knocked out sort of July, August time, and they move remarkably quickly, the boys at John Catt, don't they?
Yeah, I've got a book out next month, so and then I've got working on my 6th one, so I'm catching you up, David.
You'll be for sure.
But you've got more books on the way. Are you writing right now, or maybe you can't tell us? We're looking for.
I'm not writing. My writing process it's really unhelpful for me to talk about it, because I don't think it's like anyone else's that I've ever spoken to. But I get an idea, and I sort of flesh out, I sort of sketch out what I want to do, and then I do nothing for months and months and months. I just sort of chew it over, and then at some unspecified point in the future, I'll be moved to write it down. I've learned not to feel guilty or worried about the fact that I can't write on a daily basis. I just know, and I know that if I don't feel like writing, it's rubbish. I can't produce anything of any value. But so I just sort of trust that when I feel like it, when I feel moved, it'll all happen. So it's not. I'm not very good at deadlines or anything like that.
No, I can relate to that as well.
Right, okay, good.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I tend to write books, and John Catt are fast at getting them out there, and I'm quite fast at writing them as well, because I sort of have an idea. But I find it all consuming sometimes. Like I can't sleep, and because I need to get all these ideas down, and it's tough. But I enjoy it. And actually, something I wanted to say to you is that your blogs are quality as well. Are you still blogging? Do you like blogging? Because there's lots of teaching authors.
I mean, I went through a period of where I'd write like one a day at various points in the past. And I think I checked a while back. I think there's about 900 blogs or something on my site. But in the last couple of years, I've written far fewer blogs, because I don't know. I'm less. I don't know. Maybe I'm just busier. I don't know.
Well, Noreen said she misses your blogs, and actually, whenever I'm researching, I go to your blog, type it in, and you've usually covered it. You've usually written something about it, so that wouldn't surprise me that there are hundreds of blogs there. Because I don't know if you remember, in Dubai, I told you about I was rejected from a certain technological brand company, whatever. They had this Distinguished Educator Award, and I was devastated at the time.
Yeah.
But the feedback, yeah,
I think we're
yeah.
online, aren't we?
Yeah, we probably are. I've just got all the ADEs going to troll me now. But I did have feedback. Yes, and you've blogged about this, and this is right. You're the only person I found, and that was so comforting for me at the time, because the feedback I had from someone on the advisory board was that my video application focused too much on teaching and learning and not the products. And now I look, yeah, and that does say it all. At the time, I was thinking, why didn't I include this product or this product? And now I think, no, I did the right thing. I was applying for an education qualification, and your blog helped me massively. So whilst that might have been quite a few random blogs you wrote for me, I needed to read that at the time. So thank you very much.
A few years ago now, but I wrote, I think, a series of about sort of 3 or 4 blogs about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all of the things that I said, that these people sort of, this is, I think I almost sort of said in there, I'm going to predict how critics to this blog post are going to respond, and then bless them exactly what I said they did. And I just think, I find it very hard to take seriously someone that's taken, the corporate shilling and is basically a sort of walking, talking advert for a company. I find it very difficult to take seriously anything they have to say on education. I'm sure they're good people, but I don't know why they feel the need to subsume themselves within these brands.
Yeah, so Mark Anderson, who IT evangelist you worked with, he's great because he says about he's agnostic, that he could turn his hand to Google, Microsoft, Apple. He's not, cut me and I bleed Apple. He's not like that. So yeah, I've gone more like that. So it was a blessing in disguise for me. But like I always do, search your blog, and there you go. You'd written a blog post about that. So definitely, we want you to start blogging more again. Although there's threads on Twitter, and so people aren't perhaps blogging as much. They're writing long threads, and it's just changed, isn't it?
It has changed, and it used to be the fact, and various people have bemoaned this on the internet, that it used to be the case that there were real conversations and debates that happened in the comment section on people's blogs, and those don't seem to happen anymore. But then, I'm as guilty as that of anyone. I can't remember the last time I commented on someone's blog. So, maybe I need to put, if I want more of that, maybe we all have to do more of it.
Yeah, well, I don't comment on people's blog, but I see lots of the dialogue from Twitter and the discussions from that. And actually, being in Abu Dhabi, thank goodness that I do have Twitter, because I have been able to stay connected and follow people like yourself. And imagine years ago, it was very disjointed out here. So when you were the keynote speaker, that was a really big event for the region, because it was, for many people there, the first research ed event we'd been to. It was challenging the current practice that were happening in a lot of schools. There was Rose, what was her name? Professor Rose. She was also the keynote speaker there, and you were on a panel with her. Yeah, so it was great. It was really interesting. And that's actually something else I wanted to talk about. You've spoken at a lot of research events around the world, haven't you? Dubai was just one of them, but I was looking, and you've got a good connection with that. Is that because the work you
Well,
publish, your
that. I mean,
relationship with Tom Bennett?
I think I'm very lucky in that I've had the opportunity to go to all sorts of places around the world, which I would never have been able to do else. But once you've done that for a bit, and this, I'm sorry if this sounds like moaning, but once you've done that for a bit, it's not that much fun anymore because it sounds really glamorous, but the reality is you're just on aeroplanes and airports and hotels, and conference centres, and home again, and so. And also, people would get in touch with me in various parts of the world and say, "Would you like to come and do something?" And I'd always have to factor in, well, it's a minimum 3-day commitment for me, and people would only ever want to pay for the time you're there. And so,
Yeah.
one of the real things for me of lockdown of the pandemic is that I don't think I'll ever do international travel again, because when people
Wow.
get in touch, say, "Well, I could come and visit your school or your conference, and this is the fee that I would charge, or I could just do your webinar for massively less. What would you prefer?" And not without good reason, they prefer the cheaper option,
We've got
which is
James.
brilliant.
I was just going to say, we've got your friend James Theobald in the studio that you gave a shout out to before, English teacher.
Get him on,
Yeah, feel free to press the call button, James, and join us. We're just having a good old chat. We've covered everything: books, blogs, social media, and that's really interesting that you say that you prefer the webinars to. I mean, I'm the same. I was always asked to speak at events, and I couldn't because I'm in Abu Dhabi. Now I can. So, but that's interesting that you say that, because some people say, "No, I can't wait to get back out there." But I suppose you can have more time with your family, and just saves you all the hassle of the travel as well. You've done quite a bit of online CPD, haven't you? Like, have you got a new platform? Oh, here we go. We got Noreen ringing in. Sorry, there. Hello, Noreen.
Hi, Kim. Hi, David.
Hello.
So lovely to hear you. I just wanted to say two things. Firstly, David and Martin on this show, they had invited me, and that was really good to see them give importance to governance. So thank you for that. And secondly, on a personal level, once we were at a conference together, I think it was the Education Festival, and if you've been there, you know what a long walk it is from the event place back to the station. And David very, very kindly gave me a lift. So he's a very kind man, as well as a brilliant educator and a writer.
I can't think of anyone I would rather give a lift to than you, Noreen.
Thank you. Brilliant show. Thank you.
I remember it well.
Okay.
Oh, thanks, Noreen. I know you're a big fan of David Diner, and you've been commenting about how you miss his blog, you love his books, you're glad he's on social media. So that's absolutely lovely. And was the show you were on, the show with Martin Robertson? Is that the show that?
Yes.
I feel guilty about that, because Martin was the driving force behind that, and I just became too busy because I got a job. Basically, I just didn't have the time to keep it up, and I think Martin got a bit. Well, I think he doesn't really get annoyed. Martin, he's so sort of charming and debonair and laid back, but it just sort of trickled out, which I feel a little bit sad about, because we had a lot of fun doing it. But anyway, doesn't
can you revive it?
Well, I guess
or
we
was
could.
it?
I had this this mad idea that I was going to be a YouTuber, and some sort of income stream that came with it, which was obviously nonsense, because we were talking to lovely people like Noreen, instead of about school governance, instead of talking about how to make a lovely shepherd's pie, which people want to watch YouTube for, isn't it? So we were on a hiding really. We should have done more shepherd's pie and less school governance. That was So next, if we ever come back, Noreen, you could tell us about your favourite recipes?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I'll give you my favourite cake recipe.
Wonderful. In fact, could you give us the cake recipe now, Noreen, for the listeners?
Well, I'll tell you what. Next time we are at an event together, I'll bake it and bring it, and you can buy me coffee.
It's a deal.
Good.
I've just tweeted out. I've just tweeted out. Hit like and subscribe for David Dido Robertson. It's your time you're wasting. So that's what you need to do, David. The YouTubers. That's what.
I've got to say, don't like and subscribe to it, because nothing happens anymore. You're wasting the limited energy it would take to subscribe. Just carry on subscribing to Kate, and you'll get far more fascinating content.
They could binge watch all previous episodes. So you could be.
Have to be mad, but they could be.
So is Martin Morris?
There's one where we interviewed E.D. Hirsch, which was quite nice. He's terribly old, E.D. now, but he was great. He was good form. Who else have we spoken to on there? I can't remember.
Who would be your dream guest if you could have anyone in education on It's Your Time You're Wasting? Who would it be? Who's your dream guest? Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I'll have to have a think about that. Get back to you.
Because
probably would. I think one of the things, and it's a lovely privilege, but I think by and large, I've had the opportunity to meet and chat to all of the people that I really respect and find interesting in education. And and I saw that you've got old Mr. Meta-analysis, haven't you, doing your forward? I met John at a conference in London a few years ago, and he was absolutely gorgeous. He was, sat down and asked me, he asked me to sign a copy of the book. Bless him. And then he sort of said, he had a conversation with me about why I didn't much care for solo taxonomy, and because he's a bit of a fan of it, and I sort of told him and explained, and he wasn't, it was all very measured, and it was like, okay, I see your points, and he was very nice. So that was a bit of getting John to write you forward, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, I've had him on the show, and you know what was really funny, because this is a breakfast show and it's live, we had a bit of confusion with the timings. So he thought it was 7 a.m. Melbourne, and he rung me one night at 1 a.m. and he's like, "Hi, Kate, I'm ready to go." I'm like, "Oh no, John, no, it's not today, and it's not at this time." So that was a bit like a mad dream. John Hattie ringing me at 1 a.m. But someone else who's a hero.
Wake up in the middle of the night. John Hattie on the phone again. I can't bear it. John, look, stop ringing in the middle of the night. What's wrong with you, man?
I honestly didn't think it was real.
The wonderful experience I had some years ago was, I think it was 2013. That I'd had some blog exchanges with Dylan William, who is, everyone knows old Dylan, don't they? And he'd been very generous, sort of, responding to critiques that I'd made about AFL. And we set up. We were both going to be speaking at the Wellington Festival of Education, and Dylan got in touch and said, would you be up for doing a debate? And Wellington were up for it, and we did this debate with him and me talking about stuff. And obviously, I was a bit terrified, because there's very few people as knowledgeable and as erudite as Dylan. And I thought, he could have torn me to shreds if he'd wanted to, but it was just a wonderful experience to share a stage with him. The best. I mean, it's a bit of one of my favourite memories from that is that we were introduced. A woman came up to introduce us, and she said, and the next event is Dylan William discussing stuff with David Dido. Or David Dido, she probably called me, and then left. And Dylan Williams said, as only Dylan William could say, he said, "There's nothing like a good introduction," and that was nothing like a good introduction. I was like, wow, okay.
But he's a big fan of yours. He's often in your books as writing the foreword and endorsement. So I think that's incredible that he's helped me with the book, and it is a little bit
He's so
scary but
generous.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, no,
the,
that's
the,
great.
there's a lot of education academics out there that I think teachers find very frustrating in the attitude and the stances that they take towards teachers. And it's because they're in that sort of, they of course they know lots that we don't know, but they're in this almost sort of affronted sort of position of how dare these upstarts sort of have ideas and have a platform. And Dylan's the complete opposite of just wanting to encourage people and nurture their ideas. And I think, it makes him, it does his reputation so much good. And it does the reputation of education academics good, despite the efforts of many others. So more power to Dylan.
Well, on my radio show, we have a game called Bjork Bingo, because I tend to mention the Bjorks every show. And actually, I can mention them with you because Robert Bjork wrote the foreword, didn't he, to your What If book? Is that correct? It was that book he wrote the foreword to?
Yeah, it was terrifying. I got in touch with Bob, as he calls himself. I feel I can refer to him as Bob.
Yeah.
I got in touch with I sent him an email and like out of the blue and said, I'm writing this book about your stuff, and I'd be really grateful if when I finished I could, firstly it'd be great to have your blessing, and secondly, if you're interested, I'd love to be able to send it for you to sort of say whether or not I'm completely mistaken. And like back there, the book came out in 2015, but I did most of the research and writing for it in 2013, 2014, and really at the time there wasn't anyone else writing about his stuff. Obviously, it's very popular now, but I really struggled to find anyone writing about the application of his theories in real classrooms. So I wasn't at all confident that I hadn't ballsed it up. And so when I actually sent him the manuscript and said, is it okay? He came back and he said, this is fantastic. And, would you like me to write a foreword for it? Brilliant, which obviously I was bowled away by. And then, Dylan had also said that he'd like to write a foreword for it. And I was like, oh God, who do I pick? So I went with both.
Of course. Yeah, no, I was revisiting your books and I saw that and I thought, God, that's great. And that's what Bob, as we say, when he was on this show, said, that he needs people to take his research and put it in a classroom context, because they've been doing that research for decades. The frustration Elizabeth Bjork felt, we're talking about the 60s and stuff. So yeah, the fact that you were bringing that to mainstream attention, and that's where I became familiar with the work of the Bjorks. It's influenced me. So yeah, just incredible.
They got in touch with me and a maths blogger called William Emery. I haven't heard from him
recently.
Recently.
They're friends with him.
Just
yeah,
invited us to their lab in San, and I couldn't go. I can't remember why, but he went and did some stuff with him at the Bjork lab, which would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm going then, hopefully next year. Yeah, so my uncle lives in California. I dedicated a book to the Bjorks, and I was like you, just reached out to them, didn't know if it was the right email address or what, and then they were so helpful. I mean, Bob's edited things I've written. I wrote an article, he edited it, made it much better, and then I gave them an Amazon voucher as a thank you, and he said it was a toaster for his lab. And a coffee machine, and he said, "Come and visit the lab." And all very random.
I think a lot of academics, and I think almost academics who aren't education academics are better at this, if anything. Certainly from my experience, are just so sort of interested and grateful to find actual normal non-academic human beings getting in touch with them and going, I find your work interesting. So when I'd written Making Kids Cleverer, I got in touch with David Geary and said, I don't know what you think of this, but I've written about some of your ideas in part of the book. And he was like, oh, this is great. Thanks so much for letting me know. And he wrote a little sort of puff piece for the inside cover, which was really nice. Those sorts of experience. I've had a number of those. Just getting in touch with people I found interesting, and they're often delighted to communicate with you.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said about you worried about ballsing it up. Well, I was writing about retrieval practice, and there was just some concepts, retrieval induced forgetting and things. And I just was very honest and said, I'm not sure if I get this, because it was just, I was reading a lot, I was struggling, but that's the right thing to do, like you did, to just, to reach out and ask for help, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I suppose Twitter's fantastic for that as well, that we can put things out there and just say, can anyone help me? Can anyone clear this up? I mean, the fact that I've got you here, an author that I admire. I remember meeting you, and I'm so sorry. I said something like, you're so much nicer than you are on Twitter. And then I realized that sounded awful. But like Noreen, I just was blown away by how kind you are and how much time you took to talk to me and listen to me. And I think that's only because you see sometimes people on Twitter and you get these perceptions of them because they're passionate about their views.
I know that I've had people on Twitter in the past, and I know I can be sort of a bit spiky in that format. And I do, I just blanket apology to anyone that I've been a bit or rude on social media. I'm very sorry for being such a git, and I'll try to be better in the future.
But you know what? I think it's much better to be someone who is. Imagine if I'd have thought you were lovely on Twitter and then vile in real life, whereas actually in real life, I thought you were lovely. So I think that's a better way to be. But
there's people like Carl Hendrick like that, aren't they? Lovely on Twitter, but it's absolutely reprehensible human being in real life.
I have heard that.
He's an absolute awful example of humanity. Just a dreadful together.
That is the rumour going around.
Well, look, get him on the show, and you'll see for yourself. He's a shocker.
I will have to get him on the show. My favourite show. I've had so many great guests. Paul Kirshner was just absolutely hilarious. I mean, he's worked with Carl Hendrick, and he's a big fan of your work as well. And Paul Kirshner. All these.
Did you talk to him about? I mean, he's got so many sort of unpleasant stories about Carl. It's just makes your eyes.
Well, I'm co-authoring a book with Robin McPherson. You were in their book.
Obviously, so yeah, he'll know all about what a reprobate Carl is.
Yeah, I'll have to get him on and get the inside scoop. But all the comments are coming in, David, have been so lovely about you and positive. Just saying, really interesting. Really enjoying the chat and your honesty, and we've learned a lot about you today. The squatting at the start of the show, and
you don't know the half of it, Kate, and you're very great. You should be grateful for that.
Well, I'll have to invite you back, but I have been so excited because when Tom Rogers asked me to have this radio show, I remember saying to him, I would love to chat to David Didow, and I timed it. I wanted to finish Making Kids Clever, and luckily, of course, unsurprisingly, I loved the book. So it just felt like perfect timing. So it's all worked out really well. So I will let you go now and go write a blog post because there seems to be the demand for it.
Okay, I'll get right on.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being such a great guest and for everything you shared, your blogs, your books, your wisdom, your honesty. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you, David.
Thanks for having me on, Kate. Have a good rest.
Oh, thank you. Bye. There we go. Right. Oh, what an amazing show that was. Oh, absolutely loved it. I'm still just smiling and laughing. David was such a superb guest. So join me next week. I have another amazing guest. I'm so lucky. But just like David said, people, when you reach out to them, they're often just very kind and willing to give up their time, like David was. So next week, I am joined by Ron Berger, the author of Ethic of Excellence and the star, well, maybe not the star because Austin's a star, but the co-star of Austin's Butterfly. So do join me again next week, and thank you for listening.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.